the last citizen of the USSR who was forgotten in space. It sounds like the title of a science fiction novel adapted by Steven Spielberg. In fact, this is the true story of Russian astronaut Sergei Krikalev. He is in space when the Soviet Union is collapsing. While tanks roll through Moscow's Red Square, people and soldiers build barricades and fortifications, and Mikhail Gorbachev and the Soviet Union will remain just a page in history, Sergei Krikalev is in space. At this point, he cannot return to Earth. He was simply refused to be sent back. The Mir space station, whose position is 350 kilometers from planet Earth, becomes his temporary home. It was then that he received the nickname the last citizen of the USSR. But this was not the worst that could have happened to the astronaut. The Soviet Union disintegrates into 15 separate countries in 1991, and he is informed that he cannot return home because the country that promised to take him home no longer exists. This is how he got another nickname, the Lost in Space, writes rbth.com. What led to this happening? At that time, Krikalev was a 33-year-old flight engineer. He already had behind him a successful mission to the Mir station in 1988. Thus, in May 1991, he set off for the second time to the Mir space station from the Baikonur Cosmodrome, which is located on the territory of Kazakhstan. According to the plan, Krikalev's activities at the station should last 5 months, and he is not prepared for a longer stay. Suddenly, however, while he was on board the space station, a coup occurred in his homeland. Krikalev remembers that this was an absolute surprise and shock for him. He himself admits that at first, he did not understand what was happening at all. He then began to wonder how these events would affect the space industry and his program in particular. The Mir orbital station is the first long-term habitable station and the first of the second-generation space stations. It is an intricate, multi-purpose scientific research complex. In a sense, the astronaut becomes a hostage of the station. If something had happened to him, there would be no one to maintain it, and it would have been lost forever. What followed was another blow to Krikalev's spirit. He is informed that there is currently no money for him to be returned to Earth. After a month, he gets the same message again. From Earth, they try to calm him down by reassuring him that he needs to stay a little longer in space and that a solution will be found very soon. Another month passes, but the news does not change. Krikalev recalls, "I thought how this was very difficult for me. This was definitely not good for my health. However, I understood that the country is in a very difficult situation, and now the main priority is saving money." The wait. I wondered if I had the strength to survive to finish the program. I admit that at that point, in many cases, I wasn't sure. Being in outer space, especially in the early 90s, is accompanied by many risks, such as muscle atrophy, radiation, risk of cancer, weakening of the immune system, and these are just some of the possible consequences of a long stay in space. Krikalev himself is prepared for a mission lasting 5 months. Instead, he spent 311 days, or 10 months, unwittingly setting a world record. 4 missions were planned during this period, but they were subsequently reduced to 2, and none of them had room for an additional flight engineer. Russia at this time is facing very serious problems due to hyperinflation and has to sell the seats of the Soyuz rocket to the space station to other countries. Austria, for example, buys a seat for $7 million, while Japan pays $12 million to send a TV reporter. Another reason why the hero of this video became lost. At the same time, he is the most important person at the station because he maintains its functions. To return to Earth, he must be replaced by another flight engineer who is familiar with the design of the station. However, the situation on Earth is becoming increasingly complicated, and there is talk of the urgent sale of Mir while it is still operational. The other crew members return to Earth, but Krikalev, as the only flight engineer, cannot. He is forced to stay until the fate of the station is decided. Stranded in space, far from home, he asks for honey to be sent to lift his spirits. Instead of honey, however, they send him lemons and horseradish. The return. Return seems increasingly impossible for Krikalev until he receives good news from Earth. Germany paid $24 million for a ticket for his replacement, Klaus Dietrich Flade. On March 25, 1992, what had already seemed impossible became a reality. Krikalev finally returns to Earth. After the landing of the Soyuz capsule, a man emerges from it with the inscription USSR and a red flag on his spacesuit. Those who saw with their own eyes how the astronaut came out described him as follows:
pale as white canvas and sweaty as a ball of wet dough.
By the time of his return, the whole world knows about this hostage of the cosmos. He is immobilized and emaciated to such an extent that 4 people have to help him and hold him while he stands up. During these 311 days in space, the world for Krikalev has radically changed. The city of Arkalyk, on the outskirts of which it lands, is no longer Soviet, but is part of the independent Republic of Kazakhstan. The city where he lived is no longer called Leningrad, but St. Petersburg. His monthly salary of 600 rubles, which at the time of his flight to space was a very good remuneration for a scientist, has totally depreciated. Now a bus driver was paid twice as much. While in space, the astronaut makes 5,000 laps around the Earth. Krikalev was awarded the title Hero of Russia, and 2 years later he embarked on another space mission, this time becoming the first Russian cosmonaut to fly on a NASA shuttle. A few years later, he was part of the first crew to arrive at the new International Space Station. Towards the end of the 1990s, the orbital station Mir began to have numerous problems with various instruments and systems. The Russian government decides to deorbit and ditch the station, citing high maintenance costs. On March 23, 2001, having exceeded 3 times its design life, the Mir station was brought down in the Pacific Ocean, in close proximity to the Fiji Islands. In total, 104 cosmonauts from 12 different countries worked on the station. Krikalev's fighting and strong spirit were the best tools he had in space, which led to the happy ending of this story. His success is also due to a great deal of luck, a stroke of luck that many astronauts have unfortunately not had. They call Krikalev the lost astronaut, but in the end, after 311 days, he returns back to Earth. However, this is not the case with other colleagues of his. One of the most common stories is that of the lost Russian cosmonauts. That's 13 people for whom the theory says were sacrificed by the Russians before Gagarin's flight. Allegedly, in an attempt to win the space race with the US, the Soviet authorities sacrificed 13 cosmonauts and then erased all traces of their existence. Capsules burned up in the Earth's atmosphere, broke upon landing, or were lost forever in the abyss of space before Yuri Gagarin's historic flight. All of this was part of the bitter rivalry between the two powers during the Cold War. 2 radio amateur brothers, Achille and Giovanni Giudica Cordelia, claim to have made audio recordings that support the conspiracy theory that the Soviet space program covered up the deaths of the cosmonauts in the 1960s and kept this information in the deepest secrecy, and to this day. The day was May 19, 1961, when the Giudica Cordelia brothers' Torre Bert radio station, located in northern Italy, intercepted a transmission from a female voice. They don't understand the language and don't know what the woman is saying, but she sounds confused and very scared. Later, when they find someone to translate from Russian, they realize that her ship is beginning to break up. The woman is heard talking about the rising temperature inside the ship before it is destroyed in a re-entry attempt. The 2 brothers claim they began following Soviet space program broadcasts of missions that were not in the public domain, and that there were others who did not return alive. They also picked up a Morse code SOS signal from a spaceship that appeared to be moving away from Earth's orbit. Giovanni says that the signal was moving very, very fast, and the ship was moving away from the Earth at great speed. They find that instead of returning to Earth, the ship is drifting away into space due to a control problem. These claims of theirs have not been confirmed to this day, and the recordings themselves remain unrecognized. Let us know what you think about the topic. Are some facts about the spacewalks that various governments are doing being hidden from us, or are we seeing the full picture? Since mankind first took to the skies in a rocket, we have lost 18 people in space. Yet that number seems very low given our history and the fact that we launched humans into space in the beginning without knowing what would happen. The James Webb Telescope, JWT, is the most powerful telescope ever built. It can see further into the universe than anything ever created, shedding new light on the earliest galaxies that formed after the Big Bang. It will also be used to study the formation of planets, stars, and the chemical composition of space. James Webb is the successor to the Hubble Space Telescope and is expected to revolutionize our understanding of space. The project is a joint effort between NASA, the European Space Agency, and the Canadian Space Agency. The telescope is named after James Edwin Webb, the head of NASA from 1961 to 1968, under whose leadership the United States developed its program to send a man to the moon. The planned launch of the spacecraft into its heliocentric orbit of about 1,500,000 kilometers from Earth was planned for October 2018. Following recommendations from an independent review board, James Webb's launch was scheduled for no earlier than December 24, 2021. On December 25, 2021, the telescope was successfully launched into orbit from the Kourou spaceport. The first scientific studies began in early 2022. What are the objectives of the James Webb Telescope? Hubble spots new galaxies forming in the universe. It revealed that in the early universe, galaxies formed stars at a much higher rate than now. However, these distant galaxies are usually very faint and difficult to see with Hubble's capabilities. They are also very young and contain very little of the elements heavier than hydrogen and helium. They are also called dwarf galaxies because of their small radius and the fact that they contain a number of stars. Because they form new stars at high rates, they are expected to have very large amounts of dust and gas. This makes them very difficult to observe, as this dust and gas block our view of the stars within them. This is where James Webb's role comes in. As the most powerful telescope ever launched into space, its vastly improved infrared resolution and sensitivity will allow it to see objects that are too old, distant, or faint for the Hubble Space Telescope. This enables a wide range of research in the fields of astronomy and cosmology, such as the observation of the first stars and the formation of the first galaxies, as well as the detailed atmospheric characterization of potentially habitable exoplanets. James Webb's mission. The most important mission before the project is the search for light from the first formed stars and galaxies after the Big Bang, followed by studying the formation and evolution of galaxies, stars, and planetary systems as such, study of planetary systems and determination of atmosphere, study and discovery of exoplanets. Despite the mass of the device, which is half that of the Hubble, it will have a mirror 6 times larger than it, 6.5 meters in diameter. The telescope sees stars from the first billion years of the universe's formation, thanks to its ability to record infrared light. The human eye cannot see this light because its frequency is too low. In the beginning, this light may have been visible to us, but by the time it reaches us, and due to the stretching of space during the billions of years of travel, the wavelength of light increases, i.e., its frequency is reduced to the red and below visible light. The amazing discoveries made by James Webb. Although only a few months have passed since the start of the scientific program of the newly launched Space Telescope, it has already managed to make discoveries that overturn our ideas about the evolution of the universe and contradict the concepts established up to that point. James Webb captured the most distant galaxy known to date. It's a picture of something like a red star that's about 300 million years after the Big Bang. Knowing that the universe is 13,800 million years old, this means that the galaxy called Jades-GS-Z13-0 is among the top 4 in the cosmos. The previous oldest and most distant galaxy was discovered in 2015 by Hubble. It's called GN-Z11 and is slightly younger than the newly discovered one. It is about 400 million years after the Big Bang. But this is only the beginning. In fact, researchers knew that by working in the infrared region of the electromagnetic spectrum, James Webb would find distant early galaxies shifted toward this range. However, what they are surprised by is their large number. After this sensational discovery, Jehan Kartalepi of the University of Rochester stated that you can hardly find any empty space in the distant universe where there is nothing. In its short time in space so far, the telescope has confirmed 44 early until recently unknown galaxies that stretch back to 300 million years after the Big Bang. Not only the number shocked scientists, but also their structure. It turns out that primordial galaxies are much better structured than previously thought. Until the Hubble telescope, astronomers had concluded that early galaxies had more irregular shapes compared to neighboring nearby galaxies that had regular shapes, such as a disk. However, James Webb's observations show that there are 10 times more primordial disk galaxies than previously thought. Thanks to James Webb's capabilities, we are able to see that galaxies began forming disks much earlier than we thought, reports Alison Kilpatrick of the University of Kansas. This presents us with a major problem, as it contradicts theories of galactic evolution. We're going to have to figure this out very carefully and in detail, she says. Another study by the instrument found that massive galaxies formed earlier than expected. Swinburne University of Technology researcher Ivo Labe and his team claim to have found 7 massive galaxies in the Sears field at redshifts between 7 and 10. We have indisputable evidence that the central regions of at least some of these massive galaxies have already existed for 500 years after the Big Bang, and the massive galactic formation began extremely early in the history of the universe, the scientists say. Another big surprise that overturned the ideas of scientists about the evolution of the universe is the spectroscopic analysis of distant galaxies with a redshift greater than 5. It turns out that they are rich in elements such as oxygen. Astronomers believed that the chemical enrichment processes, during which stars fuse hydrogen and helium to produce the heavier elements, took a long time. But the discovery that they are also found in early galaxies is leading to rethinking of our knowledge of the rate of star formation. James Webb overturns our ideas and those of scientists related to later evolution. The telescope also has a mission to study the so-called cosmic noon. That is the period that occurred about 3 billion years ago after the Big Bang, when the universe is believed to have been at the peak of its star formation. Rin Soos of the University of California, Santa Cruz compared Hubble images of galaxies with those taken by James Webb. It turns out that in the infrared region, galaxies appear smaller compared to what is observed in the visible region of Hubble. Until a few days ago, astronomers thought that galaxies started out small and grew over time. But findings by James Webb reveal that the Hubble Space Telescope has been unable to see the whole picture, and possibly the evolution of a galaxy is accompanied by much more complex processes. If you have not yet managed to shock yourself at how little we know about the universe, do not worry. You still have time because there is more. In addition to everything listed so far, the Space Telescope was able to image Titan. Saturn's moon continues to amaze scientists with its dynamic atmosphere and Earth-like terrain. Studying that particular moon is difficult because of its great distance from Earth and its dense atmosphere. With the help of the infrared camera attached to the James Webb Telescope, scientists managed to photograph the clouds of Titan. Astronomers discovered that the moon's atmosphere is multi-layered. Clouds are formed in it, which change their shape and disappear. This makes the assumption of periodic precipitation of liquid methane even more likely. Titan is one of the most Earth-like objects in the solar system. The moon has its own atmosphere, composed mainly of nitrogen and methane, which is denser than that of the Earth. On the surface of Titan, there are liquid rivers, lakes, and seas, in this case of methane. It is known that a person can survive on Titan without a spacesuit. Only an oxygen mask and sufficiently warm clothing are needed. The average temperature is around minus 180 degrees Celsius. A study done in 2021 claims that Titan's craters have all the necessary qualities for the emergence of life. Although NASA's Space Telescope mission is just beginning, scientists are aware that they will have to change many of their views. Sometimes I wake up at 3 in the morning and wonder if everything I've been doing has been wrong, says Kirkpatrick. The James Webb Telescope is an incredible feat of space and astronomical engineering. It will allow astronomers to see the universe in a way we've never seen before. The telescope will allow us to look back in time to see the universe as it was billions of years ago. James Webb will be very short-lived. The term of operation is expected to be no less than 5 years, and the amount of refrigerant in it is enough for about 10 years of operation. During that time, it will study the universe in a way that no other telescope has been able to. One thing is certain: We can expect many more amazing discoveries from James Webb, who is poised to revolutionize the field of astronomy. These new facts will most likely shed light on our origins and give us a clearer picture of the future of the universe. If you want to support what we are doing, please like this video and subscribe to the channel.